Okay, so I thought I would make a short video on parliamentary roles. The reason I'm doing this is basically it's something that we haven't necessarily covered in as much detail as we could have done, and I hope that this will give you a kind of overview of the roles within Parliament and what different people do. I guess the first thing to say is that when we're speaking about Parliament, we're not speaking about the government are the people who run the country. When we talk about Parliament, we're talking about the institution. So we're talking about the House of Commons, the House of Lords, the monarchy, etc. And as I say, please make sure that you're clear that that's different from the government. I guess the first thing first place to start is that Parliament can seem a strange place. It attempts to mix the modern with the traditional. Whether it does it successfully or not is a matter for discussion. And you can see that on events like the state opening of Parliament, or even on a day-to-day basis when the Speaker has their procession to the House of Commons. And there's a picture, which you can see on your screen, of the Speaker walking through Parliament into the House of Commons, and he's followed by the Speaker's train bearer. This is a person whose role is basically to hold the robe that the Speaker is wearing because it happens to be so long. Now, you might think that that's their only job. And yep, they have to wear full court dress, which is a kind of strange costume with frilly shirt and all that kind of thing. But actually, they play quite a modern role because they're there to organise parliamentary business and also to provide independent advice to members of Parliament. So you've got that kind of strange combination of them playing a traditional role, but actually having to do something much more modern. So this video is going to explore some of those kind of roles which could perhaps be a little bit confusing. Right, so let's deal with the Speaker. So the Speaker of the House of Commons is currently Sir Lindsay Hoyle. He's the guy who sits right slap bang in the middle of Parliament at the front. He is a serving Labour MP, but as Speaker has to demonstrate, at least for the most part, impartiality. His role is basically to keep order within the House of Commons and call MPs to speak. Now, he doesn't sit there all the time. He occasionally has to go off and do different sort of business and work and stuff like that, and so he's assisted by deputy speakers. But for key events like Prime Minister's Question Time, it's usually the actual Speaker who's there rather than one of his deputies. Now, there is a Speaker in the House of Lords. Their role is largely ceremonial and they act as an ambassador for the House of Lords. The reason why their role is not so prominent is that the House of Lords regards itself as self-regulating. In other words, it can kind of organise itself and behave itself without having to have some sort of prominent person there to tell them what to do. I guess this leads us on to the front bench or front benchers. Now, if you watch Prime Minister's Question Time, you will see them sitting there opposite one another, and they sit, strangely enough, on the front benches of the House of Commons. On the government side, this is basically the Prime Minister and members of the Cabinet. The Cabinet are senior politicians who have been given jobs such as Chancellor of the Exchequer, so in charge of the finances of the country, the Ministers for Health, etc. They're often referred to as cabinet ministers or members of the cabinet. So as I say, they're the kind of senior people within the government. I guess that if you think about it as sort of Rishi Sunak being the head teacher and members of the cabinet being senior leadership team. On the opposition benches, so the people who face who face Rishi Sunak at the moment, there's Keir Starmer. He's the leader of the opposition. So the Labour Party are the opposition. They're not the only other MPs who sit there. There are members of other political parties. It just happens to be the case that there are more Labour MPs than any other political party. So he sits opposite Rishi Sunak, and he's surrounded by the shadow cabinet. So they're people who mirror the job of the MPs on the other side. And of course, when you've got someone like the Deputy Prime Minister standing up and speaking, it'll be the shadow member of the Labour Party, in this case Angela Rayner, because she's the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, who will stand up and argue with the Deputy Prime Minister. Okay, so the next group of people you may be less familiar with, they're called whips. Now, whips um, are people who are often criticised, but we'll get on to that. They're basically members of the House of Lords or members of Parliament who have been appointed by their respective political parties to organise their business. However, they're also responsible for discipline in the party, and this is where, on occasions, they've been accused of things like bullying, being quite aggressive, etc. Because one of their roles is to ensure that the MPs vote the right way. An example of this is what's known as a three-line whip. That's basically where you're told by your political party, if you're an MP for that party, that you have to follow the voting demands of that particular political party. So even if you disagree with what you're voting for, you have to do it. And if you don't, you can have what's known as the whip being withdrawn. Basically, you are temporarily suspended from your political party. You have to sit as an independent, and then you can get back the whip if that's what they want to happen. There are occasions when the whip is kind of permanently withdrawn, when you're basically told that you're no longer a member of the political party, and that you're not welcome anymore. A famous example of this is Jeremy Corbyn. Okay, the last person that I'm going to talk about is Black Rod. Black Rod's senior officer in the House of Lords and is responsible for controlling access and maintaining order in the House of Lords. The most famous role is at the state opening of Parliament. That's where you will have seen them. They're basically told by the King that they need to attend the House of Commons, so they walk to the House of Commons. They're called Black Rod because they carry a black rod. They have the door slammed shut in their face. They then bang on the door 3 times and are admitted to the House of Commons, where they go in and tell MPs that they're required to attend the House of Lords. So again, this is a kind of ceremonial duty, but actually they have duties which go beyond that kind of one day of the year where they play a starring role in the business of the House as a Parliament. Okay, so I hope that this has helped in giving you a bit of an overview of what the various roles are within Parliament. One thing you should remember is that aside from the MPs and the members of the House of Lords, there are several thousand people who work for the organisation.